Welcome again to the Contrarian, and we have with us someone who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. She is the eighth head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and it's so appropriate to have Janai Nelson with us today, especially as we're waiting for the rulings and the end of this session of the U.S. Supreme Court. Janai, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, April. I am so excited to be here with you. As you said, we are here together at the right time to talk about the right things.
The right things in this chaotic moment, right?
Yes.
Chaos.
Yes.
But, as we see the protests, we can't forget the protests are one thing, that legal fight is the next. What are you expecting in the remaining days of the court?
So I have to tell you, I have been profoundly disappointed by many of the decisions of the court this term. By my recent estimations, this court has ruled in favor of this administration in the past few weeks, almost a dozen times. I think that is deeply alarming when you think about the lawless acts that this administration has engaged in, most recently defying court orders. And there was a case that just came out earlier this week, the Department of Homeland Security versus DVD, initials DVD, and it involved the enforcement of immigration laws against individuals who are undocumented, and it effectively rewarded this administration for ignoring very specific, direct, clear court orders not to deport people to places, to third countries with which they had absolutely no affiliation. They were neither born there, they did not leave from that place as their last port of entry. And it's well established in immigration law. I'm not an expert in immigration law, but even I know that you're not supposed to deport people to countries where they have no ties and in many cases have no protections. That's just a clear violation of due process.
And the Sudan is one of those places now that they're talking about. And the Sudan has a lot of complicated history.
Very.
And so they're deporting everyone. Well, some people at least there. That is one of those things. And I'm like, what? So I've been hearing, people have been calling me, dear friends who are in the media who try to stay away from this. They're like, is it true that they can deport US citizens? Can you expound upon this, that what they're trying to do, this effort to deport US citizens if there is significant violation to the Constitution or to laws or the rule of law, if that, we can say that.
Yeah, let me be clear. This administration, no administration, has the power to deport US citizens without due process. And even if they want to make it a form of punishment, even if they think that our prison system is overcrowded or that it would be more economical to have incarcerated persons or people convicted of crimes housed somewhere else, they are not permitted to do that. And I know that this president, as he often does, has tried to normalize this concept, has tried to suggest that this is something he's willing to do. He will be in the fight of a lifetime if he tries to deport US citizens. Now, what I will say, though, is with the broad discretion that the Supreme Court has given this administration, will there be US citizens who get caught up in some of these ICE raids and deported? Have there already been US citizens caught up in these ICE raids? Yes. We know that to be true. And what happened through this most recent decision, where there is no court process, there's no delay, there's no time,
no due process,
no due process, where someone can say, hey, I'm a US citizen, don't deport me, or I may face persecution, whether I'm a US citizen or not, if I go to this particular country because of my background, because of, any number of factors, my identity. We must slow this train wreck down because human lives are held in the balance, will be lost, and people will be tortured. People will be brutalized. The cost of this broad discretion that the Supreme Court has given this administration is really incalculable.
I've got friends who are reaching out to me, like Sherry Shepherd, actress, host of her own Sherry show. She's the one, she says, April, is it true? I said, yes, it's true. I said, there's an effort to do this. And she just couldn't believe it. And I had to send her some more. She said, so it's really true. I'm like, it's almost in this moment, expect the unexpected, right?
Expect the unexpected, but let me tell you something, what frustrates me a lot is it's one thing to share information and to tell people about the potential threats and where this could go. It's another thing to normalize it and sit back and say, you know what, this is going to happen. We should just expect that the administration is going to do this or the Supreme Court is going to do that. We still need to create some degree of accountability, and we need to create the expectation that they will do what they are supposed to do. And that has worked in our favor at times.
So let's talk about this. And I mean, we keep talking about the losses, but and you guys have had a win recently, that Alabama voting rights case. You've had several wins, but we're hearing more about the other side and what they're doing versus the wins. Is there a win when it comes to immigration? Because right now, I mean, I was shocked since the United States sent missiles to Iran. I'm now seeing Iranians being tagged by ICE and taken into custody, raided and taken into custody. I saw someone with a Border Patrol vest on Instagram in West Los Angeles going after an Iranian. And they were talking, they were saying they were Iranian, et cetera. And they already got two. What are you hearing for the wins when it comes to immigration? Are there any wins?
Well, around immigration, it's been tough. And, in some ways, it's hard to parse immigration from uh, the protests that have now come following these ICE raids and some
Mhm.
of the court cases challenging the brutality against protesters and the militarization of Los Angeles, for
Mhm.
example. And you see some wins and losses. It goes back and forth, right? So even in the case that we were talking about, where the Supreme Court had the final decision, the lower court decision was correct. It said, stop these deportations. Do not do them anymore. Of course, the administration didn't listen in the way that it should have. But
Right.
there was the right decision held in those cases. It was right for the courts to say, do not deploy the military, the
Mhm.
National Guard, and the Marines in Los Angeles, get them out of here. And then, of course, we do see reversal of certain decisions. So right now, our judiciary is in a back and forth tug of war between those jurists, those judges who believe in the rule of law and have the courage to enforce it, and those that are willing to cave to the political pressures of this administration. But there is a way forward in immigration. There is a way forward, and it's necessary for our economy to find that solution.
That part. And let's hit that, because what people don't understand, Los Angeles has one of the largest immigrant populations or migrant populations in the nation. Karen Bass, before Donald Trump became president, told me, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles City, not Los Angeles County, here's
That's
the
right.
difference, guys. She told me that there is a strong Asian as well as a Mexican community. And the economy works in those communities in Los Angeles City for that labor. And when you block the border and do that, you decimate the economy, you devastate the economy. And I mean, I just heard Janai, in Arkansas, they're dealing with that. In Arkansas, they're dealing with that. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders is trying to figure it out. I mean, every community deals with this. It's construction, it's agriculture, it's all types of jobs. And
That's right.
yeah, and there's an impact. And when you see people not going to work and you can't get certain things done, you wonder why. Hello, this is it. So does democracy fail in this moment? Is democracy failing? Has it completely failed?
It has not completely failed. I do think the question is being called. There are so many places where I am encouraged. If we look at the total number of court cases against this administration since January 20th, and we look at the percentage, the win rate, it's extraordinary.
Mm.
This administration is losing the vast majority of the policies when they are challenged in court. So I think it's important for us to recognize that as much as we lament some of the big decisions that we see from the Supreme Court, there are lots of trial court decisions and appellate court decisions where this administration is losing and losing badly. On the other hand, when they win, because each action they take is so potentially devastating, because it's so lawless, because it's so targeted against some of the most vulnerable communities, those wins really sting. I mean, those losses really sting and they stick out. And so, it's really a catch-22. We are on a seesaw in this moment. And our democracy, though, is proving to be strong enough for us to take control of it and win on the other side. But we must take control of it. And the only way we can do that is if we register to vote, turn out to vote, and continue to hold the people we vote into office accountable, right? It's those three things. It doesn't start, just because you registered is not enough. Just because you even go out and cast the early vote or go to the polls is not enough. You have got to continue to be a noisy citizen in this country.
I agree. I agree with you. However, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, said from the Oval Office, Elon Musk rigged the election. And that's where people are like, oh my gosh, I was there at Howard University on November 5th of last.
So was I.
My
Yeah.
mother's birthday. My mother's birthday. I was like, this is
Mm,
ironic. I said, Mama, you want to give the nation a gift? But guess what?
mm.
Everybody thought she was going to win, including Kamala Harris. And then this happened. But Donald Trump was bold enough to say several times, once from the Oval Office at least, that Elon Musk rigged the election. So are there attempts uh, to find out? Are there cases that are going on actively right now to dig into his claims? And if so, if the election was rigged, is it overturned? Does she come? What happens? Or is Mike Johnson going to be president? Yeah.
So a lot of that's going to depend. The devil literally is going to be in the details. There are some challenges to seek out more information as to what happened in the election. There's a challenge that a lot of people are focused on in New York that may give us a blueprint to what may have happened. People use some of these words a little loosely in terms of rigged and influenced and, helped so-and-so to win. You can do that by flooding so much money, so much what they call dark money into an election that you ultimately can impact the outcome.
That's true.
That may be what they're referring to. We know that happened. We were very clear about that. But even that doesn't always work.
Yeah.
We know that in Wisconsin, right? Elon Musk put millions of dollars into an election to try to buy a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court and failed because the voters showed up and showed out in such numbers and with such determination that there wasn't enough rigging or buying that could overwhelm that. So we've always said that the turnout has to be too big to rig. When turnout is close and it's at the margins, then we don't know what might happen that may turn
Michigan was
anyway.
close. Michigan was close.
Yes.
Michigan was close.
Yes.
Joe Biden wanted it before. Michigan was close. And I'm, with all that happened there, taking the people trying to take the governor hostage or kidnap her, and the fight between her and Donald Trump. I mean, there are a lot of Black people who supported Donald Trump in Michigan, particularly in the Detroit area. But those numbers, just as you were talking, the numbers were close. That's another legal thing. That's why you're here. We're talking the legality of it all and the wins and the losses. I want to ask you something as well. There is a fight when it comes to something that is historic. Brown v. Board. What's the status of that? The challenge to Brown v. Board. Tell them what Brown v. Board is, please, because this is.
Listen, Brown versus Board of Education is probably the most iconic case in U.S. constitutional history. And I am proud to say that it is a case that the Legal Defense Fund, the organization that I proudly lead at this time, won in 1954, a full 60 plus years ago. And it is the case that transformed America. Full stop. It is a case that took us from being an apartheid state to the integrated society that we exist in now, that we don't even blink and think about, right? We don't even question the fact that we can enter businesses regardless of our race or color or national origin. We take for granted that we have rights to work where we want to work, eat where we want to eat, love who we want to love, sit where we want to sit on public transportation. All of that resulted from the civil rights movement that culminated in this decision that ended what was the law of the land, which was we could be separate but equal. Right? Separate but equal. Not separate because I elect to have a community of my own, which I have every right to do, but because the government told me I could not own a home somewhere. I could not get educated in a public school. I could not have access to everything that America has to offer simply because I'm Black. We ended that. We ended the legality of those policies. But right now, what we're seeing is a lot of questioning of that sacrosanct case and principle of equal protection. And that's not a principle that we made up in this case. That's a principle that's embedded in our Constitution, in the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. And so when I hear nominees for the federal judiciary asked a question, will you agree that Brown v. Board of Education was correctly decided? And they say, I won't answer, or, I'm not going to dignify that with a response, or worse, I don't know. That tells you right then and there that that person is wholly unqualified to come anywhere close to a gavel or a seat on the bench because they are not willing to uphold a bedrock principle of our Constitution. And that is complete lawlessness and anarchy in this country.
And the late Thurgood Marshall argued that case before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yes, he did.
Thurgood Marshall, who became a U.S. Supreme Court justice.
The first Black U.S. Supreme Court justice, yes.
That part. And now today, did you see that story about that award of the Florida student who wrote what the founding fathers said, that the Constitution was made for white men, everything was for white people, and he got the award for it. Can you elaborate on that? Because that actually challenges, that's again another challenge to this, what people are trying to say, Brown v. Board, the challenge of Brown v. Board.
So I saw that headline, I saw that article. I actually want to dig into it a little bit more because I don't want to misspeak on something I haven't thoroughly analyzed. What I will say is that two things can be true, because I'll be the first person to point out that the original articles of this Constitution did not recognize Black people as full citizens, right? We were counted as 3/5 of a human being.
Say it again.
Right?
3/5 of a human.
That was a compromise to end slavery, was to count us as 3/5 of a whole person.
I'm a whole person sitting here in my house. You're a whole person.
I'm a whole person.
Where's my 3/5? What's the 3/5? Is it just like half my head? I don't know.
Exactly. But I'll tell you what it was. It was to reduce the political power that we would confer just by virtue of us being present through our numbers. The power structure in this country has always tried to reduce our numbers, to reduce our political power, to reduce our rights. We did not have the right to vote until the Constitution was amended. And even then, only Black men got the right to vote through the 15th Amendment, right? So we do know that it is true that our original Constitution was made to benefit white property holding men, right? Women were excluded. So if you're going to say the Constitution wasn't for Black people originally, it is true before it was amended, before we got it to be the Constitution that it should be. It also
However, it was amended. That's
correct.
It was amended.
That's right.
And they're celebrating the original, not the amended.
That's exactly right. So we know that we have white supremacist, patriarchal origins to our US Constitution. But we also know that we quickly learned that that original Constitution was unsustainable for American democracy. And we went through the great pains of amending our Constitution,
Yes.
of creating the First Amendment, our right to free speech, a right to assemble, right
Freedom of
to
press.
protest, freedom of press, exactly, which I know you care deeply about, April, and
Oh my gosh.
thank God for that. Thank God for your
Thank you.
presence
Thank you.
as part of the White House core.
Thank you.
How important that is, right? So
Yeah.
that freedom, even though we see this administration trying to trample on that too, those freedoms are ones that have become core to American identity.
Yeah.
And that is really the America that we understand ourselves to be today. An America governed by the First Amendment, by, as many love to embrace, the Second Amendment, even though they distort its meaning.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we should
The
be
right to bear arms.
Yes, but in a particular context, right? So and then all the way to the 13th Amendment that ended slavery, the 14th Amendment that brought us birthright citizenship and equal protection and due process under law, the 15th Amendment that got Black men the right to vote, and eventually the 19th getting women the right to vote. We cannot ignore all of those amendments that helped perfect this democracy and are a reflection of who we are today and who we must remain. So any argument that the Constitution as it stands today does not recognize Black people and does not protect Black people or any other group is wholly and patently flawed, wrong, and contra-historical. So I don't know the details of this person's paper, but I can just tell you that truth about the US Constitution.
And thank you for that truth, because a lot of people, we don't have civics anymore. We don't have history and government like we used to have. And really, we didn't really have it. In my generation, we got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We got a graph of slavery and then moved on, a graph of Dr. King and moved on. And I'm like, but the consciousness is so woke now, if you will.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I want to go to Congress now. BBB, it's not Better Business Bureau. It's the big, beautiful bill. A lot of people.
What a misnomer. What a misnomer.
I know. So tell me about that. What are you fighting, or what is the fight legally that you think is happening or should happen, will happen, could happen with the big, beautiful bill?
So April, I say this with not even an ounce of hyperbole. Right now, we know that members of Congress are on the brink of destroying the foundations of the only America we know. And they're doing this through a bill that is over 1,000 pages. It is called the Big Beautiful Bill.
And many of them haven't read it all yet.
Of course they haven't. Of course they haven't, right? Because that takes work. Instead, what they've done is just followed the direction of the president, who is touting this bill that is not a big, beautiful bill, but a big billionaire bonanza, a big, ugly betrayal of the American people, of the American Constitution, of everything that we stand for, of his own promise to quote unquote make America great. This bill will destroy America, but most importantly, it will destroy Americans. It will destroy anyone who resides in this country and relies on federal government services, everyone except the billionaire and high millionaire class.
There's going to be a lot of loss financially, without predicting, but it's cutting. There's going to be a lot of healthcare loss. There's going to be a lot of hospitalization loss, like in rural areas that depend on Medicaid and Medicare. Those who depend on food programs. And that's just a little bit of it.
It's horrible.
Yeah. So, and that goes into poverty and it goes into loss of homes. It goes into a financial crisis that we haven't seen in a very long time in this nation. But what do you think Congress has lost itself, lost its way?
I think Congress has definitely come under the spell and threat of intimidation by the bully in the White House.
Even Democrats?
I, we are nonpartisan. I would like to believe that it doesn't matter what your party is. If you are paying attention to the fallout of this bill, you will see it for what it is, which is a grab bag of bad policies that pull money and resources from the poor to pad the pockets of the wealthy. And we
Mhm.
do see members of Congress on both sides recognizing this. We see John Hawley talk about the impact in his state. We see a list of hospitals that would close in the state of Kentucky, where many white residents will be deeply
Appalachia,
impacted.
Appalachia,
Exactly.
the
So
poorest white communities in the nation.
and we're seeing people react to that and recognize, you know what? I can go along with the pack and I can lose my constituencies, or I can actually speak up and say something about the harms that this bill will impose, not just on communities maybe we don't care much about, but my community.
So let's say this, and you brought up Kentucky, the poorest of in Kentucky, you have the poorest of the poor, white people, hill country, as JD Vance calls it, from where he's from,
Hmm.
Appalachia. So it's not people, black people, it's people, JD Vance, hill country, we're talking about Appalachia, the poorest of the poor. Is there anything else on Congress and the Supreme Court that you want to mention legally that we should be on the lookout for, that you want to pique our attention to or turn our attention towards?
Absolutely. So first, I'm going to say clearly and unequivocally, this big ugly betrayal, this big billionaire bonanza cannot survive. We must call Congress members and tell them unequivocally that they should vote no on this bill. And you can reach out to the Senate, you can reach out to the House, you can reach out to your elected official, and you can reach out to those from other states and tell them that this is bad for America. This is bad for all of us. So that's one thing that I want to make sure everybody understands. The second thing that I'll say is that Congress is also trying to destroy the infrastructure of giving, of charitable support, of basically the immune system of the United States, which is the public sector, which is, nonprofits like the Legal Defense Fund, right? Without us, we'd still be in an apartheid state. You need organizations that can hold the government to account, that can represent the voiceless, that can say, these policies are wrong and destructive and harmful, and we want to challenge them to make America better. And if
Yeah.
you continue to attack organizations and universities and churches and other organizations that are trying to do the public good, you are taking away all defense mechanisms in this country for the voiceless, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. And that is something we have to keep a close eye on. There are going to be many ways that this administration continues to weaponize the idea of immigration, weaponize trans issues,
Yeah.
weaponize our fear of war and threat. And underneath it all, it is a veil, a very thin veil for all of the destruction of social policy that they want to get through that will, again, help enrich the wealthy and impoverish the already poor people in this country.
And one last question. Were you surprised this week when Al Green went before the House with his comments and said he wanted to file HR 537? And the speaker was like, he did that at 10 o'clock the first day, and it was like within an hour, they said, we're going to vote on this. 128 Democrats voted against it. I would have thought in the midst, everyone keeps talking about chaos, chaos, chaos. I would have thought that maybe he would have had this time, the fourth time, he might have had some support. I mean, were you surprised at how fast the procedural efforts moved on this?
Surprise is an interesting word anymore. I mean, there does come a point where nothing surprises you anymore, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that I was not profoundly disappointed and profoundly disturbed by what I see as a continuing capitulation, a continuing lack of unity and uniformity at a time of crisis, and a lack of backbone and spine. So yes, it should be surprising. The fact that it isn't surprising is probably the worst indictment of some of our elected officials.
Yeah. This cannot be the norm anymore. I mean, we have to still continue. Yeah, because if you start saying, oh, if you don't feel it, if you don't see it, if you don't taste it, if you don't smell it, something is wrong, because this is not normal. This is chaos. And Janai, every weekend now, it's like you think, oh, I can breathe. Every weekend is when everything happens. It's like, oh my God. So it's like the week is your weekend. And the weekend, it's like, it's every weekend, it's something.
It's
so,
upside down. It's
right.
upside down.
The world is upside down. Hamilton. Yes, I've seen it many times with my kids. Janai Nelson, we thank you so very much for putting the point on the exclamation about being surprised about the legal process and all things legal that are going on that we should be paying attention to. Thank you. You are amazing. Guys, we need you to follow the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. What is your handle on Substack?
We are NAACP LDF. So please find us on all of our social platforms, And I'm Janai Nelson on Instagram. And you can find me and most importantly, the Legal Defense Fund, LDF, on all social platforms. We're there to inform you and to be a trusted resource.
And you can find The Contrarian on all platforms, particularly Substack, subscribe. And you can definitely find me, subscribe, follow, and do all of that, because we've got great programming ahead. Janai, thank you so much. We appreciate you and your legal mind. We're going to have you back.
Promise? I hope so. I hope so.
Yes, yes. Guys, thank you for watching. We've got more to come. And don't forget to tune into The Tea with me, April Ryan, on Thursdays at 5 p.m. You got to watch. We knock the pot over. We spill a lot of tea. Take care. See you. Thanks, Janai.
Take care, April.